Can the San Francisco 49ers keep this band of playmakers together for the foreseeable future? We're talking about that here on today's San Francisco 49ers Report, and specifically, we're talking about Brandon Aiyuk. But with these players on your screen, Brock Purdy, if he continues to ball like he's been over the last season and a half, he's going to be due for a big contract at the end of his rookie deal. Brandon Aiyuk is going into the final year of his contract next year. He could demand at least $20+ million because the wide receiver market is exploding. And then Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle are all top 10 at their position for being handsomely paid. So can this band stay together, and for how long? It is certainly a fair question. Because when you canvass the San Francisco 49ers roster, how long are the Niners and this front office going to be able to keep their core group of playmakers together? And how long is the Super Bowl window going to remain open? Because the books are getting a little bit tight financially. I think that the San Francisco 49ers have to find a way to pay Brandon Aiyuk, because this Brock Purdy to Aiyuk connection this year has been tremendous. It's been one of the best quarterback-wide receiver tandems across the National Football League. And the Niners continue to say, Brock Purdy is the real deal. He's our franchise quarterback. Players in the locker room absolutely love him. He is passing the eye test right now, #1 among all quarterbacks in multiple statistical categories. And if you want to continue to support your young quarterback, then all of these trade rumors that have been circulating since last offseason about trading Brandon Aiyuk should be shut down. Are they shutting down? According to ESPN, they are, and San Francisco might be looking to pay Brandon Aiyuk. We're going to get to that here on today's show. First, make sure you subscribe to the channel for daily analysis, news, and updates on the Niners. There's a big reason we're the largest independently run Niners channel on YouTube, because you can count on us for reliable and consistent coverage. Should join the faithful family here at Chat Sports. Going back to the financial conversation here, some big money ballers on this Niners team right now. And at some point, you do have to get creative with the books and pull off some financial gymnastics. The good news here is that a lot of the players on your screen who are getting paid top dollar are still in their prime, and a lot of them are still young. Trent Williams just went on Arik Armstead's podcast and said, I have a lot of gas left in the tank. So that's really good news. But when you look at the players on this list, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Arik Armstead, Javon Hargrave, all of them are either the best player or one of the best players at their respective positions, and all of them are either the most highly paid player at their respective positions, or at least in that top 5 or top 10. And Brandon Aiyuk is going to be due for a large contract extension. He was a first-round pick in 2020. The Niners extended his 5th-year option. He's currently in year 4. So next offseason, as we go into the 2024 year, it's basically going to be a similar situation as to what happened this past offseason with Nick Bosa. Aiyuk is going to be looking for long-term financial flexibility because he only has 1 year of financial control. And with the way that he's been playing, he's going to demand $20+ million. He was in the locker room the other day talking with some reporters, and somebody in the locker room said, that's the $20 million man. One of his other teammates chirped even more than $20 million. You also have to think about how the wide receiver market has really taken off over the last couple of years, really since Christian Kirk signed that deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The number for Aiyuk, though, is going to continue to increase if he continues to play at this rate. Because this year he's been, by far and away, one of the best wide receivers in football. What a year for him. He's totaled 72 catches for more than 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's a career year right now. He's 9th in yards per game, 1st in yards per target, 1st in air yards per target, 1st in yards per reception, 2nd in yards per route run, 3rd in receptions going 20+ yards, and this is probably the most ridiculous stat of them all. Brandon Aiyuk this year has 45 catches. 40 of them have gone for first down. So what I actually meant with that first note, 72 catches, 1,400 yards, and 6 touchdowns, that is what he is on pace for this year. But all those other numbers, I mean, Brandon Aiyuk has been one of the best wideouts in the league this year. And I think that he's the number one wide receiver on this team. Special players like this don't grow on trees. That's why the Niners can't trade him away, and they can't afford to lose him. Look at what he's done this year. He's got those 45 grabs, the 881 yards, and 5 touchdowns. You want to tell me that Deebo Samuel's the number one wide receiver on this team? I completely disagree. The numbers don't really represent that, as Deebo been banged up. He's often injured. Aiyuk is always available, and the production has been better for Aiyuk the last 2 years. George Kittle, on the other hand, putting together a really good season. 46 catches, 667 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So coming up next, we're going to tackle this big question here. What is the Niners' stance on a Brandon Aiyuk trade? Are they looking to deal him or not? It sides with the latter, but we'll get into the specifics. First, let's tell you about Prize Picks, the number one and largest independently run daily fantasy sports app in North America. This is daily fantasy sports made easy, and you can get a $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS. Some of the selections that we really like going into this week's action: Jared Goff, more than 262.5 passing yards against the New Orleans Saints. Jalen Hurts with the brotherly shove tush push, always a given. More than a half rushing touchdown. And then another given, Christian McCaffrey, more than a half rushing touchdown as well. So sign up today. This is Daily Fantasy Sports made easy. You pick 2 or more players, and you choose more or less on their projected stat lines. It's prizepicks.com/CLNS. So before we told you about Prize Picks, I posed that question: what is the Niners' stance on a Brandon Aiyuk trade? Because this past offseason, a lot of rumblings that teams were calling the Niners about the availability for Aiyuk, because they were looking at the Niners' financial situation, which we talked about earlier, to set the foundation for this conversation. Here's what Nick Wagoner, who I think might be the best beat reporter covering the Niners right now, had to say and report on the Aiyuk situation. At his current pace, Aiyuk will finish the season with 72 catches, more than 1,400 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And while there has been plenty of speculation about whether the Niners can afford to keep him, they cleared more than $41 million in salary cap space with contract restructures in September, with an eye toward rolling most of that money over into 2024. A chunk of that money is earmarked for Aiyuk, whom the Niners received calls on about potential trades last offseason. San Francisco had no interest in dealing Aiyuk then, and given his continued ascent, that's unlikely to change this offseason. So for anybody out there who's a big fan of number 11, the Let's Go Brandon train, it looks as though San Francisco, they're really pleased with the player. They want to keep him around as part of this core. If Brock Purdy and Brandon Aiyuk have this connection working right now, imagine what they can do as they continue to have more experience playing with one another, and they continue to get those reps in. Because Brock Purdy to Brandon Aiyuk has been one of the best quarterback to wide receiver duos in the National Football League this year, and these are still 2 very young players who it looks as though they have limitless potential. And that's why I think that San Francisco has to pay Brandon Aiyuk, and they have to keep this 1-2 punch together. Because also, if you believe that Brock Purdy is the guy, you got to appease, support, and surround your young quarterback with the necessary pieces for him to continue to be successful. And right now, Brandon Aiyuk is Brock Purdy's number 1 wide receiver and option. Here's what Purdy had to say about his number 1 threat. It's that trust. It's that faith in each other. What we do every single day at practice and stuff, it's showing on the field, and it feels good. Brandon Aiyuk does it all. He's just one of the most underrated receivers, I think, in the NFL. I have all the confidence in the world in him, and he's always where he needs to be. As a quarterback, that's all that you could ask for. And nothing really speaks to the connection that Purdy and Aiyuk have more than the touchdown throw that Purdy made to Aiyuk on Thanksgiving night, as the Niners were able to feast on some turkey and feast on some Seahawks. I still can't get over this throw from Brock Purdy, especially because he drifted to his left and then threw it across the field in an island of not just one, not just two, not just three. 1, 2, 3, 4 Seahawks defenders, and he dropped it right in the bucket to Aiyuk. This only happens with a special connection where the two players know each other like the back of their hands. And that's how Purdy and Aiyuk have been able to maintain this steady level of play. And that's why it's important to keep these two together. Here's what Aiyuk had to say about Brock Purdy, which really backs up the connection that they have and how a touchdown like that can happen, because Purdy knew where Aiyuk was. No hesitation. He let that throw rip, and he fit that ball inside a keyhole. I just think he has a good feel for how I'm about to run my route on certain looks and where I might end up. He has a good feel of all the receivers, so I think that helps his accuracy even more because he can feel what we're doing. Sometimes you can't teach feel. Sometimes you can't teach what Brock Purdy does with his vision. And sometimes we get so enamored with the quarterback being 6'5", 240 pounds, with the bazooka and a cannon for an arm. With Purdy, the arm strength's good enough. The athleticism is underrated. The feel and the vision and the accuracy and the touch that he has are all elite traits that sometimes don't show up during combine measurements. There is no replacing Brandon Aiyuk. You do not let special players walk out of the door, especially a young player who every year that he's been in the NFL, he's been able to get better and make remarkable improvements. So if you want the Niners to pay Brandon Aiyuk, I want you to spam pay BA. This is a player that I think has to be with this organization for the foreseeable future.